Steve, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I am Molly Barron, the founder of Projects by Molly, LLC. And back in September of last year, I was connected with Steve through the SCORE program, which offers free, amazing coaching to new small business owners. And Steve, I'd love it if you would give yourself a chance to introduce yourself and sort of what your background is.
Sure. My name is Steve Salisbury. I am the president of Steve Salisbury Consulting, LLC. I focus on helping executives with change management, leadership development, and culture development. And I really look at those three things as working together very important. It's very important because without one of the three, you're not going to be successful in growing your business.
Mm-hmm. So as you all can see, I just got the world's best free mentor in Steve. And one of the things that we've been talking about as we've been meeting is that we both wanted to get a little bit more into podcasts and interviews. So welcome to our inaugural conversation, and we're going to see where and how this leads. So with that, we're both going to take turns interviewing each other so that both of our audiences get a little bit more acquainted with who we are and what we do. So with that, Steve, I'll turn it over to you for the first set of questions.
All right. Well, so I've always looked at project management and change management as working hand in hand. I do not believe that you can be successful with a project without those working together. And I'm kind of the change management guy. You are definitely the project management person. I'd like to kind of zero in on that a little bit. So tell us first a little bit about your background, Molly.
So I grew up in corporate America, and my background has historically been a blend between project management and corporate training. So my first job out of college was at a medical records software company called Epic, which some people may have heard of. I did project management there for 2.5 years. And then I did corporate training there for 4.5 years. Then I left to be a consultant doing project management work for a couple of years. Then I got hired on at a hospital where I was doing some project management and also leading a training team. Then I went to another software company where I was first the director of project management and then the director of education and engagement for clients. So pretty much a complete flip-flop back and forth. But what that really has shown me is that I do have a passion both for project management, but also teaching people how to do project management and how to become project managers.
So you recently started your company. Why did you go off on your own? Why did you start your own firm?
So I left my corporate job in September of 2021. And really, it was sort of, I think it was a journey that a lot of people were on, especially through COVID and the pandemic, and wanting to feel more inspired by the work that we were doing. And it was actually a seed of an idea that I had first gotten. I was taking a series of leadership training courses through an organization called the Right Foundation. And as so happened, a bunch of entrepreneurs happened to be in those seminars with me. And we would get thrown into projects like making breakfast for the training. So I would sit down with them the night before and I'd start mapping out, okay, breakfast comes out at 8:30. We got to pull the eggs off the stove at 8:25. We got to put them on the stove at 8. We got to do this and that and this. And we better wake up by 6 a.m., right? And throughout me working with these folks, oftentimes their response would be to kind of look at me as though I were a wizard. And I was like, this is not magic. Like, this is just project management. But that's when it started to hit me that entrepreneurs, small business leaders, and folks who work for smaller companies don't necessarily have a strong background in project management. So to them, it really looked like I was a wizard. And that sort of lit the spark of the idea for me that helping small businesses and individuals get better at project management was a need that was out there that I might be able to fill. And when you pair that with how I was raised, my dad actually was a newspaper reporter at the St. Paul Pioneer Press. and he had a column on small business owners. So he would do stories and inevitably would take me to their shops, and the owners would always kind of sit me down and point to a framed copy of my dad's article, usually right by the door, and they would tell me how much of an impact he had on their business, and things that they were able to do once he had given them that sort of feature spot in the press. And that always left an impression on me. And I always sort of just had this soft spot in my heart for small businesses and really trying to help people who really need it and could really benefit from it. So that's why I did it.
That's cool. And you make a couple of good points. One is that project management is everywhere, right? We do it every day, whether we think about it or not. Making breakfast. I've been doing some landscaping lately. And, there's a sequence of events that you have to go through and you have to do them in order. And there's some timing if you're dealing with live plants and, yada, yada, yada. So, and the other is, I think something we share is passion for small business. I know I'm very involved in a small business organization here in Southwest Michigan. And, I really applaud what these folks are trying to do for themselves. In sometimes facing some pretty serious odds, to be successful. So project management, why is it important?
What a great question. How much time do we have today, Steve? Project management is important, I think, mainly because one of the core values of project management is organization. And if you can get organized in terms of your plan of attack, how you're going to live your day, how you're going to get your work done, I really do think it helps you get it done better. I mean, that's not to say that there aren't brilliant, chaotic minds who sort of like swoop in and get something done. But, when you have a logical, thought through order, it really helps you focus and get a lot more done than you thought you could, or especially if you were just going to wing it. The other thing that I would say why project management is important is because it really helps you come up with a better plan for the future. One of the core disciplines in project management is to be looking out for risks or things that could go wrong. And I think that's so critical because so many of us set out on projects thinking like, oh, it's going to be easy breezy. This is going to be great. I'm going to go paint my bedroom. And when you do that, maybe you give yourself a weekend and all of a sudden it's Sunday and you've only gotten prepared to paint because guess what? The hardware store didn't have your drop cloths, or they ran out of the kind of paint you wanted, or you realized that you actually had some other commitments and you forgot to schedule time for it, So I think that better planning, forecasting, and looking at risks specifically really enable us to be much more successful. And as I mentioned before, to just get a lot more done than we could without a plan.
Yeah, I agree. So what would you consider to be the most important skill that you have personally?
Oh, I think for me, I have a skill at taking something that is really complex and overwhelming and breaking it down into more and more manageable pieces. And furthermore, organizing within those pieces, I think that's the strength that I bring. It's something that I have a hard time articulating because it is something that's very natural. It's just sort of how I live and breathe. I mean, if you ask my college roommates, they will tell you that I used to get a syllabus and I would comb through it and I would put in my calendar, here's the final, I'm going to start studying for it here. Here's my paper. I'm going to start a rough draft, a second draft, and then it will be done. I mean, I never scrambled to do stuff in college. I know that is like super weird, but it's really just sort of a core part of who I am and how my brain processes. And I think that is something that a lot of small business owners, especially who have huge plans and huge dreams, sometimes it's a little bit too difficult to sort of get started and to jump in because there's so many options and so many angles that you just get lost.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I can align with what you're saying there for sure. So you started to kind of allude to this, but when you're a project manager, you usually have a project team. And, it's important to be able to do that segmentation of things that need to be done. So each person on the team has clearly defined roles and responsibilities. But as it relates to kind of managing the team, it doesn't always go smooth. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, right? How do you handle disagreement on your team?
Well, I actually teach some classes on fundamentals of project management, of which conflict is always a topic. And I was just teaching it last night, so the content is fresh in my head. And I think one of the best things that we can all do about conflict is to really sort out the productive style of conflict from the non-productive style. So sometimes psychologists will call that cognitive versus affective conflict. But the idea is when we can have conflict about ideas versus conflict about people and their personalities, we can actually get a lot farther on a project. So, if we can start to focus and hone our conversations on, okay, my plan is plan A, and someone else says, okay, my plan is plan B, and it's different from A for these particular reasons, and here's the timeline benefits. That kind of conflict is really good, because the more we talk about it, the more we can find out, maybe even make a plan C that combines the best elements. However, if we have that same conversation and I say, here's plan A, someone else says, plan A is stupid, here's plan B, which is way better, then it becomes, well, it's not stupid, and I get defensive, and then they say, well, yes, it is, and here's the reasons why, and also you're stupid, and then that really spirals into the destructive type of conflict. So really focusing on how do we keep our own minds geared onto cognitive conflict, and then also understanding that sometimes the right way of dealing with a conflict is very dependent on where the conflict is. If it's early stage and we can still talk about ideas, maybe we sit down and we collaborate about it. But if there's something that's just gone so hot, maybe you just avoid that conflict for right now. Maybe that's not the hill to die on. Or if there's a small conflict and it doesn't matter much, but John on your team has had a rough week, maybe you just give in and give John, the benefit of something going good for him for once, and then, move on down the line. So I think really sort of balancing how do we keep as much in the cognitive realm or the productive realm of conflict, and really choosing how are we going to engage. That really helps make sure that conflict, which is going to happen, can actually be dealt with in a productive way.
Yep, I agree. You made a couple of points that made me think about emotional intelligence. And when you're a member of the team, a member of a team, it's not important that you're right all the time, right? In fact, that begins to become tiresome. So I think, sometimes it's important to take the long view. Maybe you have a major issue, but maybe it doesn't need to be resolved today. So taking the long view, thinking about the risk, as you mentioned earlier, of delaying a decision on a particular conflict, if you will, and letting emotions settle, and again, taking that long view to really let things percolate a little bit. And I think the other point you made is it's okay, and again, you have to weigh the risk, right? But it's okay to, quote, give in, or to give the other guy a chance to shine, right? And I think it comes down to emotional intelligence, where you have to do your own sort of internal assessment, risk assessment. Okay, if I let this go, what's that going to do to the project? Well, nothing. And what's it going to do to my reputation? Well, it might actually enhance my reputation, right? Because I'll be seen as, quote, the good guy. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, good stuff. So you and I are independent consultants. We work with lots of different clients. Mm-hmm. And in the years that I've been doing this work, I have identified what makes a good client and what kinds of clients I want to stay away from. What's a good client for you? What are the characteristics of a good client for you?
A good client for me is, first of all, somebody who knows that they want some help in terms of getting organized. Um, the converse of that, if someone is like the head of a company and hires me to fix somebody, that is not usually a great strategy. So really somebody who's willing to be coached, first of all, and also somebody who is willing to learn. Project management is actually not as scary as I think it sometimes sounds. And there are some very practical basics that literally anyone can apply to get a good handle on their organization. So someone who's really ready and willing to step in and learn those tasks. And then the other thing I think is, for me, I'm really looking for clients who are committed to not just learning, but also doing and putting into practice a lot of these strategies. Because one of the things that I think about project management is that it does require a certain amount of discipline. It doesn't need a lot of discipline, like to the extent of maybe you do project management-y things twice a week, half an hour each, right? But really making sure that when you put that half hour on your calendar, you are going to go over your project plans, and you're not going to sell out for, Wordle or whatever you might be playing at the time, or, something like that. So I think those are really it. People who are open, people who want to learn, and people who have the commitment to actually put into practice the strategies that we go over.
Yep, I like that. Yeah, humble enough to be willing to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I find too that I learn right alongside my clients. So it's,
Yeah.
it is, yes, I want clients who are willing to learn. And I think part of that is because I want to learn. I want to see what works for this person. And, I have a set of methods and strategies that I use, but they don't, it's not like I can use the same plan for every single client, so I'm continually learning and changing and reading new books and trying new things myself. So I really sort of want to partner in that journey.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the other thought that came to mind is that in my experience working for many years in this field of change and leadership and culture, there is a direct positive correlation between the level of humility of the leader and the success of the initiative. It is direct and positive, of course. Yeah. My last question for you is, what piece of advice would you give to other people who want to become solo entrepreneurs, independent consultants?
Oh boy, I have so many thoughts on that. I think the biggest thing that I learned, so, when you think about becoming a solopreneur, oftentimes I think people have the idea that I'm going to do it myself. And my advice would be, don't try to do it yourself. Get help. For me, Steve, you've been a tremendous help for me through the SCORE program and offering mentoring and offering tools and offering just like ways to think about how I'm framing my business. I've also gotten free help from the Women's Business Development Center, which is a branch of the Small Business Administration. And they have people who will help women founders literally write business plans. And it's all free. There are also, chambers of commerce. There are local business programs. There is a lot of help out there for people who want to start companies. And my recommendation is to find it and to use it, because as a small business owner, you are going to have to pay for a lot of things, especially getting your business up and running. So utilizing what you can for free can really set you apart and get you ahead of the game in many respects. I know it did for me.
Good. Excellent. Yeah, it's amazing how much free resources out there if you just, kind of start poking around a little bit. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for answering all those questions.
You bet.
Flip it back to you.
All right, now you get to be on the hot seat, Steve.
All
So
right.
I wanted to start out. So you have an awesome online presence. And one of the things that I've been really following your thought leadership on is the idea of this time period. I kind of alluded to it earlier, where we are seeing a lot of people resign from their jobs. And other folks have termed it the Great Resignation, but you have taken a little bit of issue with that title. So I was hoping you could start by explaining, why is calling it the Great Resignation all wrong?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Well, I think when you start looking at the root cause of why people are leaving,
Mhm.
it has a lot to do with autonomy. It has a lot to do with job satisfaction. I would argue, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I'd argue that very little of it is because of pay or the rate of pay. Some might be, especially recently, given how much inflation is hitting us in the last few months. But I think it really boils down to job satisfaction. And when you start peeling the layers away about, well, why are you happy with your job? It's it's a it really boils down to a lack of leadership in the organization, right? There's a lack of purpose, a lack of mission, a lack of vision, and people need purpose, right? I think when we really look at what happened in the last couple of years, the very foundations of our existence were shaken, and we start to ask questions about, well, why am I doing this? Why am I spending all this time doing this? And uh, you know, it doesn't really fit what I want to do or where I want to go. And I think it's because leaders don't spend enough time talking about purpose in a productive way, right? And what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. I also think that the the era of top-down leadership is long gone. And well, let me restate that. The era of top-down leadership being successful is long gone. It still exists.
Mhm.
I've had conversations with potential clients recently where I can see telltale signs of this, and they're trying to solve a problem. Well, hello, that is the problem. So more collaborative styles. People are looking to be more engaged, more involved in what the organization is about. And all of that goes back to how the leaders are leading. So I don't think of it as the Great Resignation. I think that's the symptom. I think that the underlying cause is that leaders just aren't leading as effectively as they could.
So, how do we solve that problem, Steve? How do we get leaders to lead better or more collaboratively?
Well, if you're vested in the organization, I think as an employee, regardless of your level, you can start asking questions. If you're an employee, right?
Mhm.
You can say, well, why are we doing this? And how's this going to benefit us, the company? And how can I be more involved? What can I take on that aligns with my strengths and interests that can help move the organization forward? Um, so I think, and I think in many cases, it has to be sort of a bottom up groundswell of people just saying, look, this isn't going the way I want it to go. And obviously, you have to be vested in the organization to do that. Otherwise, you're going to leave, which is what we see happening.
Yeah.
So I think asking that question of yourself as an employee is that, do I want to stay? Am I willing to give it a shot?
Mhm.
Do I really think there's a possibility that I can achieve my personal goals um, while I'm still with this organization?
Mhm.
And I think for you and me, what we can do is just keep kind of spreading the word, right? Every time we have conversations with with our peers, with potential clients, in whenever we have opportunities to speak, to kind of keep that message in front of people. I have developed over the last couple of years my active leadership model, which focuses on purpose, collaboration, coaching, influence, vulnerability and trust, and engagement. And, I'm not going to take time to go through all of those 6 elements here, but if you think about those kind of as a whole, it's really about being a more participative leader, right? And a leader that kind of leads that way, if you will.
So if a client were to hire you to kind of help mitigate some of these leadership challenges, I loved hearing about your model. What kind of work do you usually do with them? Like if you were going to be on a change management or a culture change type project, what does that look like in terms of the work that you do?
Well, there are as many answers to that question as there are clients that have hired me. But I would say generally my clients hire me for one of 2 reasons. Either they need to kickstart some sort of a change initiative, and they're looking for advice on how to do that, consulting on how to do that, and or they're looking to better equip their team, their leadership team, to drive those changes. So they kind of work together, and in many cases I do both kinds of approaches, if you will. So just to drive down a little bit, the first is organizing around change, and that's really taking the leadership team through roughly a 1-day workshop and going through, okay, what is the purpose? Who's impacted? What's it going to mean to them? How do we talk with them? What do we want this to look like in 5 years? And then what are we going to do over the next few months, right? So it's a very structured program that really kind of sets them off to be successful with their initiative. And I think I like it for lots of reasons, but I think from an executive perspective, in the change management field, we spend a lot of time working on leadership alignment. Well, this 1-day workshop does it. It gets everybody aligned. They're aligned after 1 day. Now, you have to keep feeding that over time, but the initial obstacles are all taken care of. So it means less time in your change management track focused on leadership alignment. The other program that I do is really more about, in its simplest form, we'll say improving teamwork amongst the leadership team. But it gets back to the V, vulnerability, in the active leadership model. Really, it's really about building trust. It's about an organizational trust. So, you talked about conflict on the team, right? And being able to have a conversation that says, well, that's a good idea. I really like that. And maybe if we added this, it would be even better. Or, you're better at this than I am. So maybe you should weigh in on this. That's vulnerability. That builds trust. Yeah. And this 1 day, again, it's about a 1-day workshop, actually is a sequence of activities that really helps the leadership team become more vulnerable with each other and make it easier for them to commit and be accountable.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Now, how did you get started doing all of this? Like, it sounds like magic, like we were talking about earlier too, but how did you get into this field?
Well, like you, I grew up in corporate America. I actually spent 30 years of my career at Whirlpool Corporation,
Mhm.
which is a major home appliance manufacturer that happens to be headquartered in Southwest Michigan. Um, and in my career there, I had first of all, it's an amazing company. Um, but in my career there, I had lots of opportunities to work in lots of different areas. And most of my career was actually in IT, but I wasn't a technology guy. In
Mhm.
fact, they kept me away from the technology, and that was a good thing. But they put me more on the business facing side of IT,
Mhm.
and I was responsible really for building relationships with the business to identify and develop projects. There you go.
Love it.
To help them improve their business areas, whatever that might have been. And, I ended up doing work on the front end to help them figure out what it is they wanted to do and make it feasible. And then I helped them on the back end implementing the change, right?
Mhm.
So that's how I really got into this work. The last thing I did at Whirlpool was help with the merger with Maytag, which was the largest acquisition in the appliance industry history. And that really sort of made me say, you know what, I can do this as a consultant.
Yeah.
So I went off and I worked for about 5 or 6 years for a boutique consulting firm on the East Coast. And then for the last 10 years now, just about coming up on 10 years, I've been on my own. And, I've been really fortunate that even though I have a very strong manufacturing and supply chain background, aka Whirlpool,
Mhm.
I've been really fortunate to work with lots of different organizations, different industries, pharmaceuticals, retail, um, not for profit. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Um, and and it's interesting because people sometimes, I get a call from a recruiter looking for a consultant, and they'll say, "Well, what industries have you worked in?" And I say it doesn't matter because people are people. People are
Love it.
people, and change is change, and leadership is leadership, and
And
culture
projects are
is culture,
projects.
and projects are projects. So um, I don't know. That's maybe a little bit more than just how I got into it, but um, yeah. And I just love working with people. I love seeing things change. I love it when the light bulb goes on and people, oh yeah, I understand what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Mhm. That's awesome. I love it. So, my last question I am going to steal from you, which is what advice would you give to other folks who want to go off on their own as a solopreneur like you have done?
Oh, that is a great question. You know, I think probably one of the most important things that you can do as an individual is really be clear on what your purpose is and what your strengths are.
Mhm.
Be really clear on that. I know that I kind of wandered around a little bit early on, trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up, and that probably took a little bit more time than it should have, but it is what it is, right? But I think going into, especially if you're going to go off on your own, be really clear and um, don't be fooled by the apparent romanticism of being on your own, because it's a whole lot of work and you often don't know where your next meal is coming from. But I think if you get really clear on what your strengths are,
Mhm.
what you want your purpose in life to be, that'll go a long way.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And now hopefully all of you watching understand why I scored big with my score mentor. Steve, thank you so much for conducting this interview experiment with me. And I'm so excited to see where we both take all these answers. So thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. It's fun.